chat. There were a number of questions sent ahead of time. I'll try and work them in throughout the conversation. But again, if during the conversation you have a question, use your Zoom hand or chat. If you'd be kind enough and you're comfortable with, if you don't, please either share your business name, and certainly don't have to do that, but if you want to give us an idea about a business, you're in retail, you're in restaurants, you work at a law firm, you're a dog groomer, whatever it might be, just to give some context to the elected officials. This call's in keeping with our tradition in Chester County of trying to talk through things even when we disagree, having open dialogue, sharing information, best practices, and ideas. From the chamber, while we've been trying to advocate for things opening sooner, I think our objective and what we can all agree on, one of the things that all of our chambers are working towards with elected officials, is that whether your reopening day is May 25th or June 25th or later, that we're going to try and do everything we can to put every business that's eligible to open so that that business is ready to go safely to take care of its customers and its employees on the day we're ready to go. And we'll continue to make that our mission, to be a resource for you, working with our elected officials in Harrisburg and Washington. So with that, I'm going to send it over to our elected officials, who will each offer a comment, and then we'll go right to questions. Again, I have some that were sent in, but please feel free to load up the chat bar or raise your Zoom hand. First is Senator Tim Kearney. The senator represents the 26th district, which, as we shared, is parts of Delaware and Chester County. You may know that prior to being in the state Senate, he had served as the mayor of Swarthmore. He also holds the distinction, as he will tell you, of being the only architect in the state Senate. He serves on a number of committees, but is the Democratic chair of the Communications and Technology Committee. So if he were in charge of this call, we never would have had the snafu, because he would have known what to do. So we very much are grateful for his time, because we know, like all of us, he's pulled in many directions. I'm going to put my phone on mute and send it over to State Senator Tim Kearney. Tim, thank you for being with us.
There we go. All right. Thank you, Guy. I appreciate it. I am Senator Tim Kearney. The 26th district includes Willistown and Easttown in Chester counties. The majority of my district is in Delaware County, and I also have the distinction of being the only senator to have two congresswomen who are constituents in my district. This is obviously a very difficult time for all of us, and we're seeing aspects of how we're reacting to this are all new. It's difficult times. I am an architect and run a small business with my wife, a small architecture firm, and we have challenges not nearly as great as people do in the restaurant business or in some of the other parts of the economy, but it really does affect all of us. We are new to this. I haven't agreed with every decision the governor's made. We're still pushing and fighting back. We both our caucuses in the House and the Senate sent a letter last night to the governor again, and I say again, pushing for real estate services, for example, to be opened in a responsible way, because we know that that's possible. And we have every indication that we're actually going to make traction with that this week, and hopefully we'll have a good announcement to make midway through the week on that. You know, we're opening up slowly, and in the yellow phase, we're not even, everybody's a little confused about what the guidelines are and what they actually mean. I think on a local level within the district, we have been pushing for people to do things like buy gift certificates to their restaurants that they normally support, so that we can at least have some income in those. And we've been doing them not as gift certificates for use, but gift certificates like a micro loan to those businesses. We've made progress. We continue to make progress flattening the curve. We know that we need to figure out what the new normal is going to be. And I think it's going to be a transitional normal that's probably going to have to be around for a year or two while we kind of, while a vaccine gets developed and those things. But, I do believe there are aspects of our economy that could be reopened safely. Like I said, we've been lobbying the governor to make these changes and open things up in a way that he's allowed to under the Constitution. The two laws that we passed last week basically are unconstitutional because they, what we as the legislature can do is vote to lift the entire emergency declaration, and no one is doing that. But we're doing what we think is a responsible thing. We're lobbying hard to try to get things open that we can get open. I continue to be flabbergasted as to why garden centers aren't open. We've been, pushing for that one. I'm still not sure where we are on that. And I have to admit, I'm frustrated because we can't understand the logic necessarily of the rules that the governor's been laying down. But that being said, I'm not a public health official, and I am someone who's used to listening to experts, and my hope is that we'll figure out how to get things open safely, and we do it hopefully in concert with the people who are actually on the ground trying to get those businesses open. So.
Thank you, Senator. Our next speaker is State Representative Melissa Shusterman. Melissa is from the 157th District. After all these calls, I finally get to say I'm sitting in the 157th District. And so my state representative is now on the call. Melissa, prior to being elected to the State House, had a number of positions in the private sector involving marketing and video production. She had her own business prior to going to the State House. She serves on a number of committees, but maybe perhaps most interesting to this call, she serves as a member of the Tourism and Recreational Development, because I see that there's a number of folks from different tourist or restaurants. So Melissa now will join us. I'm going to mute my microphone and welcome Representative Shusterman for her comments, and then we'll begin with questions. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Guy, and thank you for the Chamber for hosting this. I think it's very important. And as Guy mentioned, prior to becoming your public servant or the public servant of the 157th and the elected official, I ran my own company, a video production company. So if I was experiencing this without being your public servant, doing 5 to 10% worth of work during this pandemic of re-editing videos or animation or to do videos. I think, look, this has been very difficult. Initially, we're really mostly concerned about making sure people had food and shelter. But let's fast forward to where we are today. I think for the last month, small business and mom and pop shops are critical to me. They're critical to all of us in Pennsylvania because they're the heart and soul of what makes our boroughs, our downtowns dynamic. So for the last 5 weeks, I'm pushing to make sure we have a grant and loan program. I was able to also push for that in both Montgomery and Chester County, and they do have a grant and forgivable loan program in both Montgomery and Chester that we're encouraging people to apply to. But let's go back to this small business loan and grant. It would be primarily for businesses under 5 people, and the grant would be up to about $15,000. Why is this important? Why am I bringing this up as well as speaking about tourism? Is when we think of tourism, we often think of the largest attractions throughout Pennsylvania, but many of these attractions are supported by these mom and pop shops. What do you do after you see the attraction? You go get a bite to eat, you buy something, you take something home, you experience something else in that town. So I'm working on a work group within the Democratic caucus of what would be our proposal for tourism, and we have many ideas, but they have moved forward with presenting my $50 million towards mom and pop shops throughout Pennsylvania. So that is one initiative, and the #1 initiative that we are going to be pushing forward. I echo what the senator is saying. Real estate's very frustrating, though I awoke this morning to a wonderful letter coming from both the Senate and the House, and I hope to see a reasonable real estate reopening this week, which is really a week or two too late. I've been speaking to realtors, and just on my end, being a state representative, not a senator, I'm holding virtual office hours, business Zooms, and multiple calls with business leaders to make sure they can apply for whatever is currently out there, as well as, you know, just blow off steam or offer suggestions in conversation with their state rep. So thank you. Now I'm open for.
Thanks very much. I appreciate the comments. So one of the questions that was submitted ahead of time, and actually one that had shown up on other calls, was the question that sometimes in defining industries that covers a gamut of sizes, both in terms of the physical structure of a business and also the number of the employees. And is there a way, the way, you know, Representative Shusterman, the way you talked about perhaps having aid for what we'll call maybe micro businesses, but is there a way to prevail upon the governor to look at businesses with maybe 5 employees or less, or 4 employees or less? Again, sort of the storefront business, whatever your business is. We've heard everything from dog grooming to comic book sales to other sort of businesses. So again, it's when I think there's a concern that when there's a discussion about retail or whatever, or real estate, that covers the gamut. So is there a way maybe to try and get some of those very businesses that you'd like to get aid to maybe to have it revisited, to look at these micro businesses with 1, 2, 3 employees, be able to reopen given the relatively small number of employees and given what was usually limited foot traffic?
Well, now that we have our real estate letter going out and some movement with that, and hopefully also with our garden centers, that is my focus. Is currently in New Jersey, they are allowed to do curbside. And I am encouraging my small mom and pop businesses to be prepared to do curbside. So I think that is our next push, is to be able to open small mom and pop, comic book, used clothing stores, sole proprietorship, curbside before June 4th or on June 4th as we move to yellow.
Okay. Let's see. Dave has a question. Dave McGrogan, I'm going to turn the floor over to you because you actually asked a question and got 3 or 4 other folks echoing it. So in essence, the floor is yours and you get to represent a whole bunch of folks in the meantime.
Thanks, Guy. I'm actually reaching out to everybody from New Jersey today. It does feel a little bit more free down here at the shore in New Jersey. It's interesting, just the stress and the panic sort of in Pennsylvania, and when you cross a bridge and you're down here at the Jersey Shore, there's definitely a different feeling of total and compelling lockdown and the world is ending. I guess my biggest question, and this has been a question I know that's been posed a lot, I just feel it's really unfair to continue to make this a community spread issue when clearly all data is showing this is a significant nursing home issue. The data has definitely shown us that in Europe and Italy and China, that this is definitely a very severe disease for the elderly, especially with significant comorbidities. I was a practicing chiropractor for 8 years in Brookhaven and media before I owned restaurants. So I understand that the science behind this a lot, in terms of the fact that what science is telling us is, if you're a 20-year-old, 30-year-old, 40-year-old healthy person, yes, you may get COVID. Your chances of recovering are really significant. Your risk is very, very small. We clearly have something that can just absolutely destroy a 75-year-old with a few comorbidities, especially if they're cohabitating in nursing home facilities like Fair Acres. So my problem is, and I think the problem of most business owners are, when you look at Chester County particularly, Chester County had last week 85% of the deaths were nursing home. Bucks County is a good example. Only 4 cases of community spread last week in Bucks County. 4 cases out in the community. Every other case was directly tied to a nursing home. So why are we not pouring all of our resources towards nursing homes? Why aren't we maybe getting these nursing homes to where there's only 1 resident per room? Because we know sharing bathrooms is a significant mode of transmission of this virus. And why are we holding businesses hostage based on the cleanliness practices of a nursing home that's already stressed and doesn't have enough PPE. So as an example, every single person on this call right now, if Fair Acres, I think there are over 150 cases or more. If Fair Acres continues to explode and have issues, we're all on lockdown indefinitely, according to the governor's plan. And then if Fair Acres fixes a problem, but then it happens at Granite Farm Estate, or it happens at the Wallingford Nursing Home or some other location, then we just stay on lockdown indefinitely, yet there's not one thing a human being on this call can do to help those nursing homes. The virus is already there. It's not, if my kids want to go play at the park, they're not spreading this virus to the nursing home. You know, and I understand the argument, and I've seen Rachel Maddow do this argument about nursing homes are porous, that they have to go out to a store and they have to shop the nurses' aides or the nurses. I think it'd be much more cost effective to get people back to work and off unemployment if we had to provide resources for these nurses and nurses' aides so they don't have to go to Acme, so they don't have to go to the big box retailers. So what can we do to get the governor to understand that tying our freedom to individual nursing homes' hygiene standards is absolutely ridiculous at this stage? And how do we get the society back open while protecting absolutely our weakest and our most vulnerable? You know, if I open my restaurants, I'd be pretty comfortable to post a sign that says, if you're over 70 years old with significant health issues, please do not dine with us for the next several months. You know, why are we restricting everybody? So hope that conveyed the message.
Okay, yes, Senator, please, thank you.
Thanks. Dave, we hear you kind of loud and clear. We've been, for the last month, we've been working with the health departments in Montgomery County and in Chester County on trying to change the metric that the governor is using into something that's more fair and straightforward. You know, the issue with around the long-term care communities is that you have two of the most vulnerable communities. That you have the people who live there, the people who you know, are the residents who, as you described quite correctly, have other issues which can make this disease very deadly to them. But you also have the healthcare workers who are transient. They go in and out. They often tend to work in 2 or 3 of these places. They're the members of our society that we don't pay very much to do the kind of work that they do. You know, one of the problems in Fair Acres is, again, as you described correctly, is things like shared bathrooms and shared rooms. Well, you know, physically, there's not the space there to give everybody a single or to make that kind of work. Those are the kind of structural issues that we're seeing, not only with long-term care facilities, but with schools, for example. You know, we're I've had several town halls around education where we're trying to figure out what that kind of new normal might look like, what we can actually do to, you know, it seems like the only thing for education might be some kind of hybrid solution where kids don't go all the time, you know, or they don't go every day, or they somehow, you know, without driving up transportation costs like crazy, if they went half days and those kinds of things. So we're pushing for this behind the scenes. We agree with basically the way you're saying it. Obviously, nothing is quite so black and white, and there's always issues around the edges that we have to deal with. I have a neighbor who's thankfully coming home from the hospital tomorrow, but he's you know, he's in his late 50s in good physical condition. He was on a ventilator for you know, for 12 days, and it's luckily he survived because of you know, but the right answer is somehow got to be more thoughtful, more nuanced than what we have right now. And it's got to be ways that we can figure out how to try to control the virus where it is in the long-term care facilities, and figure out how the, you know, society can get to function again. I heard a restaurant owner in Florida last week talking about the fact that they opened up and they got about 25% of their normal revenue, but he still had 80% of his overhead that he was, you know, required to run the restaurant. So, I mean, I definitely feel for you, and we got to figure out, you know, what that really kind of means and how we can make this kind of new normal, which I think is, hopefully, as I said earlier, is going to be a temporary new normal before we get to the new normal after that.
We have a question about child care, and I want to make sure because that usually comes up on each of the calls. And let's see, it's Stephanie. You have a question on child care. Please go ahead.
Hi, sorry. Yeah, so my name is Brian Witt. I run Arrowhead Day Camp, which is in Chester County. We've been here for 65 years. My biggest question is as we start moving to Yellow, I know Connecticut, I know Georgia, I know Oregon has come out with camp, guidelines and stuff like that. I know the ACA is working with the CDC right now, but it's very vague what they're saying. It's saying small groups and stuff like that. When is Pennsylvania going to start coming out with these guidelines? Because I don't know. Most of my parents, we service between 400 and 450 kids every year. They said they're sending their kids, but we need these guidelines so that I can, how much more staff do I need? What am I going to be able to transport these kids? We're in Chester County. Most of our kids are from Montgomery County. Can I pick these kids up? So I just think I've been trying to get guidelines because we're supposed to open up June 22nd. I'd rather you guys honestly tell me now, May 18th, there's no way I can open up, than to tell me July 5th, because it's literally going to cost me between 40 and 60 grand for us just to open up our facility. So I just want to know if you guys have any guidelines, any guidance, when's it going to be coming out, that kind of thing.
I was wondering if you could drop your email and contact information in the chat, and I'm requesting that from a couple of people, because this issue, like I mentioned, is being brought up on every call. It's very easy to say, let's open up. We need guidelines. Well, we did get a series of guidelines that obviously didn't include your circumstance and your particular business last week. I think it was a week or 10 days ago from the governor, and that was requested. And he was able to, lay out how businesses are supposed to approach moving to yellow and eventually to green. So I think this issue is really important because many people aren't going to be able to go back to yellow and command their small business or be in an office or do whatever work without having that childcare. I was single parent raising my son for the majority of his life, and it really was my number one stressor. And these camps are signed up. You sign up in January. It's almost like a lottery. I would feel like, oh my gosh, I'm covered. And when you're not covered, you feel completely exposed. So I'm going to look for your email. You can send it privately to me. I will follow up. If you also want to send it to the senator as well, we can make sure between the Senate and the House that we have an answer for you sooner than later.
Okay. Yeah, that would be helpful because,
Of course.
Yeah, just trying to, get the guidelines. We have the parents that say, how are you going to social distance? And we're not. Camp. But we can put them in small groups and, eliminate how many people they're coming in contact with. But I heard from the Chester County Health Department, it's going to be somewhere between 10 and 25 kids. That's a big difference. So
yeah.
I will definitely send that over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the name of your camp and the address.
Okay.
So we can both, Senator and I can get back to you.
Okay, thank you.
The day camp, right?
Yes, we're a day camp
Okay.
in Willistown.
Yeah.
Okay.
The information is on its way through the magic of email.
Wonderful.
Thanks for raising that. The next, Heather from Historic Sugartown has a question. Heather, floor is yours.
Good morning. I'm Heather Reiffer. I'm director at Historic Sugartown. We're in Willistown Township. Historic Sugartown is classified as a museum and historic site under arts and entertainment. We're not allowed to open in the yellow phase under at any level. We understand fully we can't have the larger events like our beer gardens and fundraisers that attract hundreds of people. But we have small workshops that we can bring down to 4 people at a time. And we have guided tours that we've already figured out, ways we can handle that. I also have colleagues from other historic sites that are also trying to figure out their camps And they can't currently, because they're a museum or historic site, they're not allowed to open in the yellow phase. So they're in this limbo of, well, can we or can't we? So I guess our question is there any way, when you look at the yellow phase guidelines, that you can have groups of 25 or less or 10 or less? Is there any way we can shift this so it can apply to these businesses? And I saw Nicole was mentioning this is an issue at the gyms as well, that, you know, we can open on a very limited basis as long as we, you know, comply with whatever guidelines are out there for sizes of groups rather than what your business is classified as. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. I happen to be on tourism as well as a tourism working group. So we're trying to approach this situation, and you brought an awareness to historic sites, which are very important to me. I was just going to have a roundtable throughout Chester and Montgomery County of historic sites prior to the pandemic, of how we can prepare to make sure there is more activity at these historic sites. I think and I guess maybe the senator would agree that this is something that we have to bring to the governor's attention, much like golf was brought to his attention, tennis now, the garden centers, real estate, because there's no reason why some of these sites don't have large groups coming through. It's like a family stops in and they're like, oh, you know, or you can pre-plan how many people you take through in one day. I'm near the Warren Estrick Museum. I'm a half a mile away. They don't take more than 30 people a day, probably less, prior to an expansion. Once they expand, they'll have more activities to do on the campus. So I think it starts, what do you think, Senator, with a letter to the governor, correct?
We're, you know, you're getting at the aspect of basically arts organizations and culture aspects. I'm actually a member of the Arts Caucus which is a bipartisan, bicameral, which is actually trying to address these issues. I mean, I don't know about if you have any state funding that's for your historic site, but a lot of those are, you know, some money's being pulled back already. It was already promised and everything else, and they're tiny dollar amounts relative to the problem. So we're already working on that, coming at it from the funding thing. In terms of the problem with the whole, you know, the pandemic and the reaction to it is a lot has to do with the sort of granularity of it. How do you get the nuance down to the point? It's easy to say we should close all these historic sites because they're not serving, you know, they're not life sustaining kind of thing, which is, you know, a little crazy because you can't lump them all together. There has to be a way to get a more nuanced set of regulations around things like group sizes and around things like how that can work. So, you know, again, we're making that case already, and we're happy to continue to do so and to try to get the requirements as such that are finer grained to them in terms of how they actually deal with things instead of in one big lump where everything gets put together.
A question that had come in again earlier, but also in the other calls, without replowing the field of the waiver process. But one of the questions that's come up that seems to make some sense is there a way to get more information about the waivers? I know there's been this issue about, you know, again, the transparency, but also protecting what people may have put in their waiver request vis-a-vis competitors. But I think we're at a point at the economy where we can look beyond that. I guess the question is there a way to revisit the waivers in the sense of sharing guidance that allowed, you know, a widget maker in Downingtown to be able to open so that other widget makers across the state could open? In other words, is there a way to share what was seen to be a fair or a smart or a health conscious practice that could be applicable? So instead of just an isolated, karate instructor here or there, but to explain to all karate instructors or all florists or all shoemakers? Is there a way to do that in a way that might allow even a few more businesses to open?
I think I'll start on this one, Melissa, and you can jump in. Again, I think it has to do with this is obviously the most frustrating thing we've been through in the legislature was the waiver, the not understanding what the rationale was, why stuff was granted, and an inability even for us to get answers. And we usually can get answers fairly, relatively quickly. I think that we have to do a much better job of trying to figure out what that is. I mean, for an example I can give you is that when we were talking about reopening construction up, originally there were a lot of people down the supply chain who weren't going to be part of the opening. And we were, because, people who understood how the system actually worked were able to get some words in, things got nuanced, and those supply chains, I'm not even sure if they're completely worked, but the idea was that, you could actually get the material you needed to actually do the systems or the construction as part of that. And we're hopeful. We keep hearing that more information is going to be coming out about it. You are correct, Guy, when you said that people felt like they had put in proprietary information into their application, and that seems like something that often gets in the way of how we can get things done.
I would just add, can people hear me? Can people hear? Oh, okay, great.
Yeah.
I would just want to add that it seems that we've asked the governor for guidelines. He's presented guidelines in yellow. Obviously, it doesn't hit every specific industry. And it seems like our counties are also stepping up. Our counties are stepping up with guidelines and certain, what would I say, categories of activities, like the USTA providing their own guidelines on how they would move forward. Other types of industries like that creating their own guidelines. Look, we're in a pandemic. We've never experienced this before, but we all know we're moving to yellow and then we're moving to green. So how nimble can we be? What I encourage my businesses or categories of activities to do is be prepared to be yellow and then be prepared to move to green. So whatever it is that you can specifically prepare your industry for, you're probably going to fall within the guidelines that are presented by the governor. It's a lot of this is common sense measure. I will like to take out daycares. I mean, I can't even wrap my head around daycares right now or gyms, though other states have been able to implement 30% of the people going in and other guidelines.
I want to try to combine two or three questions into one, and it was touched on earlier, and that is the timing issue. I think, as you're probably hearing, Senator and Representatives, as you're probably hearing in calls and emails, there's the dual frustration of being closed, but equally frustrating is the unknown.
Right.
Early on, it was, somebody had shared with me anecdotally, it's like, you look in your cabinet and you have 7 pieces of bread, and somebody says, well, is that enough? You say, well, is it enough for tonight? Is it enough for this week? Or is it enough for 4 months? And that's part of the thing. I think as a small business person or as a family, each day, each week, you reassess your assets and your liabilities, and you think, can I survive another week? Can I survive another month? So I think the question is particularly as we see some neighboring states, Delaware has set target dates, Maryland has set target dates. Again, while reasonable people may disagree whether Chester County should be yellow May 20th or June 20th, I would just urge, what we're hearing across the board is there a way to get target dates for yellow and green, even if at some point the data changes and heaven forbid there's a spike? but I think it would help every business, whether you have 2 employees or 200, to be able to plan your budgeting, your staffing, buying materials you may need to get up to speed. So the question is there a way to get a sense when yellow's happening here and when green might happen, so that people go about and plan? And then again, if things get really great, you can move it up a week. If things, heaven forbid, get horrible and you have to push it back, but at least an ability to plan. I think that's something that has really come across throughout these calls, is target dates to allow for planning of staff and materials.
Well, we currently have the target date of June 4th. And I think I echo what Senator, who I like to call Tim says, with the fact that we're not always in agreement with the governor. So I feel that if I was the governor right now, I would be saying, you're moving to yellow, get prepared for it for June 4th. Call your clients, book your appointment, do what you need to do to be prepared June 4th. Unfortunately, that's not been their approach across the entire state with how they're addressing our business owners and activities in communicating with us. But if I were the governor, I'd be tossing out those dates, even if I had to change them because of a spike, like what Guy mentioned. And it's disappointing he's not doing that, because that would be my personal approach to give people, 1, something to look forward to, 2, something to work towards, and 3, the possibility of knowing what their revenue could look like.
I mean, I'm in complete agreement that the unknown is the thing that drives us all nuts and it's the inability to plan or try to make things work. As Melissa said, we're not always in agreement with the governor on these things, and we're constantly pushing him for things like that. I think one way to think about this is by geography, by the county, and the other way is by the business. And we've been making more. We've been more successful at lobbying about particular businesses than we have been about particular areas. And I do hope there's a way we can push through that quicker. There was a question on the thing about voting against House Bill 2412. As I said in my opening remarks, the biggest issue with that was that basically it was unconstitutional. We don't have the ability as a legislature to pick and choose aspects of the governor's emergency declaration. What we do have is the ability to vote to lift the whole thing, and nobody seems to have the appetite for that. So we're doing what we can. We're pushing in the through the caucus and in our ways with the governor, and trying to make progress that way.
Yeah.
There's a question for.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll echo the senator, because the realtors, there's so many throughout the Southeast, and this has been very frustrating. I spend at least 2 days a week speaking to realtors. I was just on the phone with one prior to this call, and I'll echo what the senator said about it being, it wasn't constitutional, but there were certain things that we were hoping would be taken out of the bill, like open houses and other language that was a liability for buyers, and that didn't happen. So what we did is, we knew the governor was going to veto it. We started putting pressure on the governor to open up real estate within guidelines that are constitutional and also common sense. And the senator and I were speaking on the other Zoom we were on, saying that we're hoping to see that this week. I will be extremely disappointed if we don't see movement for our realtors this week, even if initially it is just filling those empty houses and properties.
We have a question from Nicole. I think she wanted to follow up on the conversation we were having about gyms. Nicole, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to make a brief comment about something that was said, and the comment was that you can't wrap your head around gyms and daycares. And I understand that. I have 2 kids in daycare, and my husband and I run a gym. You know, at last week's town hall, Senator Dinniman said something that really stuck with me. And he said, these small business owners know their business the best. And we care for our clients. We love our clients. We would not put them in harm's way. And I can wrap my head around how I can operate my gym safely because I've been doing it for 10 years. And moreover, if I don't create a safe environment, my members aren't going to come back. So, you know, for 10 years, we've preached safety in a different sense, physical safety. We don't want to injure anybody. We lift heavy barbells. We're a CrossFit facility. It's an intense way of working out. And safety has always been paramount. I know infectious disease safety isn't what we've been trained on, but it's the same concept that I have a relationship of trust with my clients. I know them by name. I know their families. They won't come if I've not created a safe environment. So I can wrap my head around how to create the safe environment. And I'd welcome any, you know, local senator, representative, anybody who would like to come see our facility in Phoenixville and get a sense of what do we think we could do to offer a safe environment. And I do believe that's why other states, you know, most notably Delaware, have come up with guidelines whereby their gyms can open up and provide some level of service to their clients. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, I do think we have to talk about the difference between a small gym and a gym the size of Lifetime. And that's what I'm saying. I have not been able to wrap my head around what a gym like Lifetime, where people are going to multiple floors, they're in and out of different rooms with very little time in between that. They're really going to have massive guidelines of how many people can enter that building, you know, the flow of the people within that building. Once again, in theory, you're my mom and pop shop. Mom and pop shops know exactly who their clients are by name, how many people come at different times, and can use those small business guidelines to conduct business. I was out riding my bike this weekend. I'm seeing so many smaller gyms, mom and pop shops, moving some of their workouts outside, and there's a lot of room. And when the weather's nice, it is a potential answer to filling in some of that time of certain things you can't do within the gym.
Thank you.
And I would
I had
just
a question. Oh, please go ahead, Senator.
just echo that, you know, when I was talking about granularity before, I was talking about, you know, how things get lumped into various categories. And you're a perfect example of that, where I think the small businesses, the mom and pop shops, as Melissa said, are areas where we should be able to do more in terms of getting them opened up quicker because of the scale of it, because of the number of people. You're talking about small places that don't have necessarily a lot of people in and out of them. Like I think about Charlie's hardware store up here in Swarthmore, which is tiny and crammed full of stuff, and you barely walk through there on any given day anyway. And it's open because it's considered a life-sustaining thing. And you know, it's very difficult sometimes to wrap your head around it. So we're going to continue to lobby and push for that kind of granularity where we can do things in terms of their scale as well.
Wanted to raise an issue to come up because as this goes on, it applies to more and more folks, as you're both aware. We, unfortunately, as a state, are approaching 2 million people who have filed for unemployment, and there appears to be an enormous backlog. The last update that Penn Live had was talking about 400,000 or 500,000. I hope that's been eaten down, but I think the question is not just the unemployment specifically right now, which is a tragedy because if you tell someone their business is closed and then they can't get their unemployment. But I think if you could tie that into, as we talk about some of the dates that are thrown out when we might go green, which could be July, August, September, is what is the thinking in the legislature as to, you know, what the path forward is, you know, to get someone, you know, to get the gym or the summer camp. How do we get them from May to August or May to September if there's that long of a gap till we're able to go green here in the southeastern Pennsylvania. And I say that against the backdrop of unemployment, where the system's just been overwhelmed, and even the best of intentions to help people just hasn't come to fruition yet.
Well, I think I'll start on this one. I think that it's important to note that an awful lot of people, the system has worked for them. I mean, unemployment is running on an antiquated computer system that was supposed to have been upgraded years ago, and wasn't for various reasons. I don't want to get into the sort of the politics of it, but the fact that the PUA grants, which are something which is finally up and working now, that was generated from scratch, from nothing, because unemployment. This is unemployment benefits for people who never paid into the system the way other people have in the past, and that's kind of working. And there are, I know they're working incredibly hard, and for everybody on an individual level, it's a disaster when their check is delayed and they're not getting the stuff. And believe me, the majority of the calls that I get in my office tend to circulate around those kinds of issues. So we're catching up a lot. I mean, I think we're seeing that things are kind of moving and finally getting to a point where people are getting taken care of right now. All the people who aren't getting their checks from unemployment, with a little bit of work through our office, it's discovered that they did something incorrect on their, an honest mistake that anybody could do. And sometimes it takes a little bit of investigating to find out what that is, because when a mistake is made, it kicks it out of the system. And when the kid's kicked out of the system, that's when the problems happen. So we're certainly continuing to work on that and trying to push that forward. In terms of, I know we keep going back to the dates about when things can open and how they open. I do think we just need to change the metrics for how we decide what things are open, and stop looking at it from a 50,000 foot level and start getting more down to the lower level, where we can actually see what those things actually mean and how those people can actually operate in what our kind of new normal is going to wind up being.
I wanted to recognize Chris Saello. Chris is on the phone. He's the CEO of the United Way of Chester County, who's looking at this from a number of perspectives. He's running a nonprofit organization in the midst of this, but also his is very much connected to the service sector and many agencies. So Chris has a perspective on this, but also ways that his agency and those he partners with can be helpful. So Chris, I want to turn the floor to you, and thank you for all you're doing throughout this time.
Thanks, Guy. Let me tell you, first of all, the chambers have really stepped up through this whole thing, helping not only small businesses, but the nonprofits as well. So thank you and all of the other chamber directors who have really been there. I just wanted to say a couple things. One, I hope you've all noticed and are proud of the nonprofits in Chester County who have stepped up huge during this crisis. Obviously, with so many people unemployed so quickly, we saw food insecurity go through the roof almost immediately. And throughout the county, every inch of the county, there are nonprofits that literally turned on a dime, and regardless of their mission, redeployed their staff to help the community. Since this is an Eastern Chester County call, I think one example is the Youth Mentoring Partnership in Malvern. They're a mentoring program, but their staff have been delivering meals to homes in Coatesville. And, that's the kind of stuff. Many of the YMCAs have turned into food collection centers for many of the food cupboards and pantries throughout the county. So I just want to give a personal thank you to all the nonprofits who have really, under some very trying times and hugely increased demand, stepped up. I did want to tell you all, and certainly we're, United Way of Chester County, we're very close to the unemployment situation. We partner with the county at their CareerLink facility here in the Oakland's Corporate Center in Exton, and we run the only financial stability center in a CareerLink facility in the state of Pennsylvania. So we're very proud of that. We just hit our 6-year anniversary, but want you to know that never closed down. Even though the CareerLink building has been closed, we've continued to take on clients. Our navigators have been working with them. We also provide counseling services through family service and they continue to do that and will continue to do that. So if you've got people in the county that you know of, family, friends, yourselves, that need some financial stability help and planning, we have made that financial commitment, and our board's fully prepared to increase the staffing at that center if we need it to meet the needs of the community. I'd also mention that we kind of turned on a dime at United Way of Chester County and got out of our normal community impact grant funding, and we started a COVID relief fund for the entire county almost immediately. I think it launched March 16th. Through the generosity of many of you and other small businesses, as well as large businesses, foundations, and individual donors, we've been able to mobilize $760,000 for that COVID relief fund, and we've already pushed out $411,000 in rapid response grants to 63 nonprofits throughout the county. That fund is there, so if you work with a nonprofit in Chester County that has a COVID-related issue and needs some help, they can find a grant application at unitedforchestercounty.org. It's a very simple one-page application. We've got many representatives on a panel that makes those grant decisions, including one of the county commissioners, a member of the Chester County Community Foundation, and others. So, we will be happy to entertain any grants from the nonprofit sector. If you're in a position to give to support that fund, there's going to be a lot of needs, especially as the county starts to reopen, and we hope that's soon as well. The nonprofits are really going to be faced with a lot. So we set an aggressive goal of $1 million for that fund. Right now we have a challenge match from the Longwood Foundation of $100,000. We've met 60 of that so far. So every dollar that's given to that fund right now is immediately doubled. We thank Longwood Foundation for that. But while our physical office is closed at United Way of Chester County, our staff have been working remotely, and we're here to mobilize the nonprofit sector and to support them, and hopefully in the process we can support you as well. So if you need anything, reach out to me. I'll put my email address in the chat, and don't hesitate to reach out to us. If you think there's some way we can be helpful in helping this community rebuild and recover. So thanks for the time, Guy, and thanks again to all of you for all that you do.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate your efforts and your teams as well. As we wrap up, wanted to give the elected officials a chance to offer final thoughts. Representative Shusterman is literally getting ready to get to Harrisburg, so I want to give her the floor, and then Senator Kearney. So, Melissa, if there's anything you care to share before you leave for Harrisburg, please do.
Well, I just want to do another shout out to our small businesses, our mom and pop shops. That also includes historical sites and tourist sites. My priority is, yes, at some point we're going to open. Let's say it's June 4th. We go to yellow, we go quickly to green, let's say. That's still not going to make up for the losses that you all have. And that is why I'm committed to moving forward with this $50 million grant and loan program. I really don't care whose name is on this bill, where it comes from. It could be my bill or another bill. But what I'm trying to emphasize in the House is just opening is not going to cure things. We need to help cover your expenses, your losses, your rent, future expenses, so that you can be moving forward as robustly as possible. So that's a huge commitment of mine. I did drop both my direct email and my chief of staff's email into the chat. Any questions you have, any follow-up, even if it's about unemployment, about a neighbor who is hungry, any issue, feel free to reach out. You don't have to live in my district. Thank you so much, and thank you for being brave and tolerating this uncertain time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Representative. Safe travels. I want to turn it over to Senator Tim Kearney for his final thoughts. As I do that, I just want to remind you that our webpage will continue to be a resource of information. You can find everything there, from the governor's executive orders, guidance from the Department of Health, guidance from the CDC, as well as different loan and grant programs, everything from the Federal Government CARES Act and the PPP loans, places to get it. And then as you prepare to reopen, there's guidance from the U.S. Chamber, the State Chamber, also a link to how you might be able to find ways to get masks or other materials you might need for your business as you prepare to reopen. You can always reach us. The elected officials have been here. They've made their information accessible. If you have any questions reaching them, you can always reach us. So I'm going to turn it over to Senator Kearney for his final thoughts, and then just going to close up after that with an update on some other chamber events that we'll have. With that, I'm going to mute, and Senator, the floor is yours. Thank you very much again for being with us.
Thanks, Guy, and thanks for this opportunity to meet with all of you. We're, dealing with the unknown is so difficult. We have to figure out how to really operate in this new kind of new normal, and we need your input on the granularity of it, how it works at the scale, at the level that you're functioning at. I put my my office phone number and my website information up on the chat. It's important that people call. If you call, you're going to get, because our office isn't open, you'll get a message, but we will call you back. We call back people every day, actually we call everybody back. But what's important about the phone call is that it gets you and your particular situation into the system, so that when we go to make our case in Harrisburg, we can say, I have 22 gym operators who, feel that we need to do something different this way, or I have these restaurant people, or daycares, or day camps. That's important. The data is important in terms of as we kind of move forward. And we're all frustrated. We're all trying to figure out exactly how to make this happen. I'm constantly pushing my colleagues to try to take the politics out of things and to try to deal with this around the problem. We've done a very good job on the local government, both the commission and the committee, dealing with this in a very nonpartisan way. And I think it's a way we're trying to show people that these things can actually work. We're in the middle of crafting legislation that would protect municipalities in terms of the way that their costs are going up and their revenue sources are going down. So trying to figure out ways that we can actually make that work. So again, thanks for this stuff. I think the last thing I'm going to say is don't forget about the census. Chester County has been phenomenal in terms of the response level, one of the best, if not the best county in the Commonwealth at this point, but keep it up, because it's easy to forget about that and let it go into the background while we're dealing with all these other issues. But please answer the census and encourage everybody to do so. Thanks again for this, Guy. Please reach out to us to how we can be helpful.
Thank you. I appreciate, Senator, to you and your staff and Representative Shusterman. This was our first round. We were able to have each of the legislators participate and have feedback throughout these calls. Over 200 different businesses participated. So something that we would like to see to continue the ongoing dialogue. Chester County is thought to be a wealthier, successful county, but this has hit us just as much as anywhere else. In the month of April, more people apply for unemployment in Chester County than in the prior 15 months combined. It's very real, and it's hurting certain industries more and certain communities more, but it's broadly across everywhere. The upper mainline YMCA is serving as a food distribution center once a week. So it is, there's certainly pockets and communities that are hit hard, but no community has been spared. So we'll look forward to working with you. And again, our goal will be not to just advocate for that sooner reopening, but I think equally important is we want to partner with other chambers and the elected officials to make sure that when we get our yellow light and green light, that every business that's allowed to open is ready, that you have the information, the resources, and the guidelines to open up, to bring back as many employees and serve as many customers as possible, so that we can get back to business as safely and quickly as we can. So with that, thank you for being with us. Please check out our website. Each week there's a variety of information and programs, everything from happy hours to best practices to information about different business sectors. And we're trying to do what we would do in person, via Zoom and other things. So please check it out. And if we're not offering something you think we should, please reach out to us and we'll try and do it as well. With that, have a great afternoon, everyone. Thanks very much for participating. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.